bring that into some of the healthcare stuff. Because, like, politics aside, I'll say
that's not too bad.
I don't care who does it, as long as somebody cleans this shithole up.
Right.
You know what I mean? We talk about the budget, how screwed up it is. Every one of these government agencies and departments appear to be extremely corrupt. You know what I mean? To a level. And I think, John, I know this sounds crazy, like my friends and I say, I think we just suspect that, we know that, but I don't think we have any idea how bad it actually is. I bet it's worse than you think it is by a significant margin.
Well,
you think it's bad.
It probably is, right? And I've lobbied in D.C. and spent enough time up there to know that it is awful.
It's a shithole. Yeah.
I mean, I love the proposal that, hey, once you retire from a regulator,
Testing.
you can't
1,
go
2,
work
3.
for one
Okay,
of the
mine's
companies
back.
you regulate.
No.
You guys ready to start?
Yep.
Let's kick it off.
We're already
done. Yeah.
Awesome.
JC, if you want to count this one out, because we've got some good stuff to talk about here today.
All right, gentlemen, here we go. Key Factors Podcast Real Estate AF in 3, 2, 1.
And welcome back to another episode of Key Factors Podcast Real Estate AF, where the AF stands for And Financing. And I'm your host, Mark Jones, and we are powered by Review My Mortgage, the largest index of mortgage programs in the nation. And lately, guys, we've been talking a lot about finance. We obviously had an election that has come to a head, and we now have a victor. And we want to know, the listeners want to know, how is this going to affect our industry as we move forward in the next 4 years? So without getting super political, I've brought on two incredible guests that I believe not necessarily always share my views on things, but we all look at the facts instead of utilizing our opinions and feelings on things. So without further ado, I want to introduce my most visited guests, both Andy Hilger and John Hudson. How y'all doing?
All right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Very good, Mark. Thank you.
Glad to be back.
So you guys excited to talk about this today?
Yes.
Absolutely.
There is plenty to talk about in this discussion. As I was surfing the web for some stuff, JC, if you can throw up the real quick reference. We've got article here from Fortune magazine. It says the housing market affordability crisis gave Trump a big boost in the polls. We've got how Trump's win could impact the housing market. We'll go over that. Toughest housing market shifted towards Trump, data shows. And here's what Trump's presidency could mean for the housing market, experts say. So we'll be reviewing some of that stuff. We will go into detail on different opinions based on facts and our experience of what we know thus far. Then we'll get into some, theories of what could potentially happen. You've got things like Fannie and Freddie potentially going back to private, how that could affect us. But let's kick this thing off, guys. What are your thoughts? Let's just lay it out there, and then we'll dissect some of this stuff. Andy, you want to start?
Sure. Well, real estate aside for just a second, I guess,
Please.
with this transition that's taken place. I was just sharing with John off the mic, so I'll just say it now for everybody. To me, I could care less what party, who wins, who loses, what their affiliation is. Our system has gotten so corrupt. Whoever's going to go in and clean house and fix that has my support 100%.
Right.
Our healthcare system, our government agencies, gosh, if you dig into it, it is pretty disgusting. When I mentioned in a previous podcast, you want to learn something new, watch some of our Senate testimony for when the NIH is brought before them and see how they're, screwing the people of this country over to make more money,
Right.
And using the concern, sickness and making people sick to do so.
Right.
It's pretty scary, So I'm excited to see changes in that regard. Whoever's brought in, I know RFK has a lot of influence and a lot of people that have done a lot of work into this. I think before anything else gets better in a society, in a political environment, in a country, wherever it may be, corruption's what's got to go away first.
Yeah.
You want real estate to get better? Well, all the corrupt agencies that, are involved in that have to go away.
Right.
And so I think the most exciting part for me of this transition, if there's a chance we can get rid of some of that or all of that, hopefully. I don't
Right.
think all of that's ever a reasonable goal. But if we can minimize that, get it back under control, I think we can see the needle start to move in a positive direction.
Absolutely. And I think you raise a great point, because anytime that you are trying to implement anything when it comes to policies, procedures, et cetera, if you've got rotten apples that are working against you in any way, shape, or form, the matrix that you utilize to determine if this is working or not, your milestones, et cetera, they're all off. So essentially, you're making shifts based upon the data that you get and what you've just done, but that data is skewed by potential corruption.
Correct.
I mean, it's
Absolutely.
just this thing where you're essentially chasing your tail for the next 40 years, essentially, to try and get something done that, what is that term where you're fighting against an invisible obstacle?
Boxing shadows.
That's boxing shadows. There you go.
Yeah. And in this case, it's more like rotten orchards. You know, they go on for miles and miles. But yes,
absolutely.
you're
Yeah.
a very good point.
So, John, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, Mark, hot sports take here. America won.
Okay.
And regardless of whether or not, your pony came in,
Sure.
America won. And where I'm going with that is it was definitive.
Yeah.
First and foremost, right? I mean, we're not being decided by 200 votes in Kalamazoo County in Pennsylvania,
Right.
leading to months and months of lawsuits and potential protest and everything else. No, I mean, it was a thumping.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
What did they say? Too big to rig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was. I believe it really was a mandate that was thrown out there. He won by 3 million votes in the popular vote.
Right.
So it's not even like, it's electoral college that needs to be disbanded. Yeah, no. He won big, and even still in California. Here's what's crazy, right? California, he still got almost 40% of the vote in California.
Right. That's right.
That's the largest margin that a Republican has gotten out there in a long time. So I think there really was people just tired of all the BS.
Yep.
And the other part where I think America won is, we get some time away from, getting our robo texts and calls to ask us for money, right?
Oh, goodness, yeah.
That'll be nice.
We could take a deep breath, and so again, right, where America won, it was definitive. At least now there's an answer.
Yeah.
And so, people that were, I'm going to wait to do anything with my life until after the election. It's like, no, well, it's over. So now you can get on with your life.
Right.
So-
And you mentioned money and finance in that monologue you just gave there. I just find it very odd that you run a campaign, you raise $1 billion, and you still owe $20 million.
Well,
But yet you want to run the country.
well, trying not to get political
That's
here,
right. I forgot.
but it's hard to
On my own show.
when you look at the breakdown. It's like, okay, Oprah got $1 million for
Yeah.
to do an endorsement. I can't even think of the lady that was the rapper that was singing up there, got like $5 million.
I think Beyonce got 10 million just to give a 3-minute speech.
Yeah, so they that to pay these celebrities, and I think that should at least make some people wake up, or maybe it did, to go, wait a minute, they're just a paid endorsement.
Why did they have to pay?
Right. Why did they have to pay?
Wouldn't
for
it have
that?
been the other way
It's-
around? Shouldn't they have been donating to the cause instead
Right.
of trying to extort money out of the campaign?
Exactly. Versus, you look at Trump, and no, I mean, he didn't pay anything.
No.
I mean, they came
No.
in. I mean,
You look at Joe Rogan podcast, he got over 40 million views for
Right.
free.
yeah,
Just
and
having a conversation like we're having today.
So
Right.
So I think people maybe open their eyes to that and are seeing, maybe I don't like the guy, but that's a bunch of BS over there, and they're just kind of rip the Band-Aid off.
That's kind of the category that I'm in. It's funny you say that. I'm this go around. I wasn't a huge Trump guy, and I'll explain why. It's one particular reason that maybe isn't fair, but when the whole COVID thing happened, he brought in Deborah Birx and Anthony Fauci to lead this COVID response thing, which, Fox guarding the hen house doesn't quite articulate it the way I think get the message across the way.
Sure.
But that was one of the most unintelligent decisions I've ever seen anybody make. If you do any work into any of those research, our Senate does it all, in any of those organizations, that they are not doing things in our best interest. They are doing things in such a way to make the most amount of money possible. And it doesn't look like this ordeal was any different now that we're kind of behind it. You know what I mean? So for somebody to bring that group in, I'd lost any and total confidence at that point. Yeah. But my kids vote shamed me, you know what I mean? And things of that nature. And I do, I saw some of the aspects of, we're bringing in Elon Musk for government efficiency. Mm-hmm. We're actually talking about some of these, corrupt healthcare companies and maybe trying to do something about it, and so I think there's a chance that if we can bring down that corruption, things get better. Yeah. So, but that's,
Well, along those points, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm excited to hear. I mean, in 2016, and pardon the language here, but Trump was like, holy shit, we won.
Yeah. I have to agree,
They were scrambling to bring people in. Yeah. And so who did he have to bring in? Washington insiders.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, he was relying on the folks that had already been there to kind of help him run the show. And I don't remember what I was watching, but it made great sense. Is this last 4 years off was almost a blessing in disguise, which allowed him to regroup and understand what it actually takes in order to get things done in Congress. So I've got to align the right people of my crew, if that makes sense.
And so now he's coming in, he's getting a running start. He's already made some announcements for who he's going to be putting in charge of different aspects, and I love it. Mm-hmm. I mean, the irony, of course, right, is that then the Republican Senate, basically went with Thune yesterday to lead the Senate because there is still an establishment process, an establishment inside of the D.C. Beltway that is very scared right now of what a Trump presidency will do. I've spent enough time in D.C. to know that whether you're on the right or the left, it truly is a machine.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
when you try to go and buck the machine in the past, well, you just get primaried and kicked out. But now I think there's enough of the popular vote that's saying we're tired of it over here and tired of it over here.
Right.
And there is a video that my brother sent me that actually gave me chills. I would love to find it and play it for you guys. Let me see if I can find it real fast. Kodak Black is a rapper.
Yeah.
Out there.
Freedom.
Sky News Australia.
Yeah.
RFK.
That channel's funny. That Sky News.
Not Latinx. We don't like it.
Hell no. It's my blood.
The Amish. Pennsylvania.
That's so great.
Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio. Boom. Anywho, so
I mean, it's
back to our regular scheduled program.
right. I mean, like you even had the Amish come out in record numbers because some Amish guy got picked on by a regulator that was, beating him up over the way he was farming.
And I think it goes back to Andy's point of the nonsense. It's just, folks, we're done with the nonsense.
Yeah.
But we're here to talk about how it can possibly affect the housing market in the next 4 years.
Good and bad.
Good and bad. We're here to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's kick that around first.
right.
Right now we're sitting. Matter of fact, rates have increased.
75 basis points.
Yeah, that's right.
The Fed cut 75.
Yep.
And rates are up 75.
Actually, the first thing on my list was to see if you could pull the 10-year bond up. I wanted to,
I absolutely
about
can.
that.
Yeah, let's
because
pull
it
that up real
has.
quick.
If you look at the pivot on that 10-year bond,
it looks like Bitcoin.
It turned and has gone up, like you mentioned, almost a point.
Yeah.
Since the exact day the Fed cut rates for the first time.
Boom.
If you go to the left a little bit, Mark, right there, that dip, September
September
was the last, mid-September where that lull was the last rate cut.
Yep.
The first rate cut, after what, 2 or 3 years of increases?
The 50 basis point.
cut. It took place there. And then since we've seen another quarter, and
Get that mic closer.
Oh, I'm sorry. We talked about this at our meeting this past week. It's interesting. The rates started to cut. Everybody expected to see mortgage interest rates come down and bond rates come down, and they've done nothing but gone up. Total inverse as to what I think anybody would expect to see. And I didn't know if you guys, being in the mortgage business and knowing a lot more about this than I do, had any ideas as to why that might be. It seems very strange.
The bond market is gangster.
Damn, it feels good to be a gangster.
The bond market basically called Powell BS.
Yeah.
They said, "Why you're cutting rates a half a point? If he had done it a quarter, I don't think you would have had that sell off.
Yeah.
I think he cut it a half a point, and the bond market said, "No, you still got inflation out there."
And that's what it boils down to, Andy. To answer your question directly, inflation is still up. Matter
Still a
of fact,
thing,
the last report that came out 2 days ago, went up. We expected it to go to or down from 2.4%. It's up to 2.6%. Our goal is 2%. We're not there
Today, producer price index this morning, right at 3.1%.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Still rising. So it's like, if rates cut, what does that now look like for the rest of the United States in regards to their cost and things of that nature? Housing rates go down. What's going to happen to real estate values? Well, they're going to go up because all those people sitting on the sidelines are going to now jump into the ring, creating multiple offers, creating this, and I can't call it a false sense of reality, because it's real if it were to happen. I mean, these home values are going to go up.
Sure. And
you, as the realtor on the panel here, have you seen prices come back down any drastically?
Significant.
Yeah. I mean,
real estate prices this year have come down. Yes.
In regards to what they're selling for or what they're listing for?
I would say pretty significantly both.
Okay.
Last listing presentation I went on, the way I do it, I go to somebody in a declining market. It's not near as fun to sit down at somebody's table and talk about how we're going to sell their house.
Reality. Yeah.
And reality, as it is in a market where you go, last month it was worth 500. Nah, today I think we're around 525, and it's going to sell for more than that. That's a lot more fun. But today it's a different story, and most of the properties I'm going to, I'm taking the step of every comp we're looking at. I'm tracking the history of it. Say if it's been on the market 100 days, and I'm showing them every price reduction, so there's no surprises.
Right.
You know what I mean? And most properties have gone through 2-3 price reductions before they're selling. Is what I'm seeing.
And the fact that they're waiting longer or they're taking longer to sell in itself shows that the buyers are either not willing to pay the higher price or can't pay the higher price. I think it's more so they can't.
I think it's just a straightforward affordability issue.
Correct.
I mean, if you think about our market in San Antonio, what's the average income here? $65,000,
Probably
$70,000 a year.
correct.
Yeah. That's remained constant. That hasn't changed in many, many years. And home values went up 39%, I think is the number, from the beginning of 2020 to the beginning of 2024 or 2023. And then they started to decline a little bit, but they went up a huge amount, way more than normal. The norm for our market is 4 to 5% a year.
Yep.
And then not only did you have that increase in prices, at the same time, you had interest rates more than double.
Correct.
On you know these numbers.
Well, I
on
mean,
a
the
average,
price of the home itself is not as large of a burden on the payment
It's rates.
as rates.
Is right.
I mean,
right.
it totally crushes folks when you increase a rate by a full percentage point. It now kicks them. They were shopping for 300. Now they got to shop for 250 or lower.
right,
I mean, it's a big cut.
Now do 3 points and 40% increase in
Absolutely.
price and see where you're at. You know
And
what
I
mean?
just
Yeah,
don't.
and
I
think
don't
that's the issue.
see. I don't see the logic or even the motivation for a seller to drop their price $100,000 to make it worthy of that. They're just turning around and going, "We'll rent it."
Right.
Yeah,
Right. No. So you got post-COVID prices and pre-COVID incomes.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a
that's a
great
good
way
way
to
to
put
look
that.
at it.
The math doesn't compute, right?
Right.
I mean, it doesn't work. And to your point there, Mark, I mean, okay, so this is the live data as of this morning.
Okay.
89% of outstanding mortgage balances are below 6%. But now let's talk about the people that may even consider selling right now. 23% of outstanding mortgage balances are below a 3% rate. 60% are below a 4% rate. So yeah, man, if I turn this thing around and rent it, I got a great cap rate.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
I'll
right.
give you a personal
As
example.
opposed to sell it at a loss
Yeah.
from what I could have sold it for 2 years
That's
ago.
right.
Sure. Yeah.
Personal example. Kristen and I, every 3 years, we buy a new house, whether we buy one that's a fixer-upper or not. That's up to what the market looks like, what we can find, all that jazz. But we have been religious to that for many years. And we've done very well, obviously, because you don't pay taxes on the gains if you stay there for 2 years and it's your homestead. So in this past season, we've been in our house 5 years. Why? I got a 3% rate on $1 million. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
It is an adjustable rate at 7 years. So essentially, once we get to that 7-year mark, there's no reason to even look around because
then.
we're not, it doesn't make any sense. I told Kristen, I said, once our first adjustment takes place, if it's anywhere close to what rates are at, then we'll start looking. But if it's not, we just got to hang on and keep buying investments and doing that kind of stuff.
Because you probably got a 1 point cap on that. So it's going to go
that's
from
exactly
3 to 4.
right. You got it. You got it. That's exactly right. So until they match what is happening, we have no motivation to sell.
Right.
So
right.
So here's the reality, right? And I do believe though that so much of it is also psyche.
Okay. Yep.
You know, I mean, and consumer psyche, and man, people have been beat down with just bad news in the last year, and so I mean, consider this, right? The share of first time buyers has dropped to its lowest percentage of existing home sales since NAR started keeping track in 1981. So it dropped from 32 to 24%.
Wow.
Like I've got to go update some slides.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a drastic drop in there. So it is the affordability because demand is still there.
Absolutely.
100%
And it's
demand
pent up like crazy.
Right.
Yes.
It's not that they don't want to.
Right.
Yeah, correct.
There was a Fed study. Federal Reserve Board put this out. And you know it's interesting when the Federal Reserve Board is actually like making comments about FHA financing.
Yeah.
Right? Because typically they just want to follow and talk about Fannie Freddie. So in the FRB study, they showed that 90% of renters lack the liquid savings of 3.5% for a down payment on your average sales price of $362,000. And that's nationwide.
Yeah.
But either way, yeah, renters don't.
Then you're running into issues that, like, for example, you and I both are advocates for down payment assistance, right?
100%, yeah.
Well, the down payment assistance programs now require 3 months reserves if you're over a certain debt to income ratio.
Yep.
Well, with rates higher, chances are that
You're
buyer's
over.
going to be
You're
over.
over.
So if you don't have the money for down payment, how in the hell are you going to have money for reserves or anything like that? So it's like, yeah, we can get the money for you, but you've got to save up a little bit so that we can actually complete this transaction.
Right.
It's double-edged sword in that aspect.
I think it's two big categories. The one you're talking about of just this is not reasonable anymore. You know what I mean? Our income is here and prices have gone to a level where it won't work.
Yep.
And then the other factor is just the scenario just doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? This hasn't happened a long time, but several times this year I've met with people and it just doesn't make sense for them to sell their house right now.
Right.
They're in this category. They have a 3 to 4% mortgage. You know what I mean? Their kids just moved out, of the house and they're thinking about downsizing. Well, prices went up. So whatever, you're going to go
You're
from
big time downsizing.
Yeah. You're going to downsize and you have to go so far down for the interest rate delta
Correct.
to make it benefit you
to feel like a downsize.
To feel like a downsize, and then they go, I'm not going to live there. You know what I mean? Like, and so you see what I mean? So
Absolutely.
there's a lot of scenarios where it just, the interest rate makes it not make sense. If they had to move, they have the ability and they would, but they don't have to. And who's going to make that change or spend more for less? It just doesn't make sense to do that. I
agree.
And you run into a lot of that in this environment.
Most definitely. So I want to talk about something that John mentioned, which is, and it didn't say it specifically, but it's more so the buyer's sentiment and then their confidence to throw their hat in the ring despite the higher rates, the higher payment, less bang for your buck concept. And this article here, I haven't read it yet, but it says the housing market affordability crisis gave Trump a big boost in the polls. I don't know what it says just yet, but let's see. President-elect Trump drew more support from a broad range of voters in 2024 election compared to 2020. And you can add Americans stuck in tough housing market to the list. And NBC News analysis of the House and voting data shows that the countries where it's most difficult to buy a home saw the biggest shift towards Donald Trump. I'm going to skip that. It says
inflation kicked everybody's ass.
Oh, for sure. For sure. The top 20% of the toughest housing markets saw a 4.2 point shift to the Republican side. That outpaced the nationwide median, which showed 3.1 tilt to Trump, according to the NBC. The housing market could also help explain why Trump improved his performance in the deep blue states. In New Jersey, for example, Ocean County has the fourth hardest market, and Trump's share of vote grew by 7.9 points. Union County is the eighth worst, saw a 14.5 point red shift, while Passaic County came in 16th worst, surged towards Trump by 19.6%.
Fascinating.
Housing prices are a big part of the inflation story, especially most persistent and severe part of the inflation story. Bernard Fraga, an Emory university professor specializing in voter turnout, told NBC, so you can separate out the price of house from voters generally concerned about the state of the economy. To be sure, Kamala offered the housing plan that was praised by some experts as the most aggressive since World War II boom. It included down payment assistance for the first-time buyers and encouraged home buyers to increase housing supply with tax breaks. Meanwhile, Trump told Bloomberg that it would lower housing costs by easing environmental and permitting rules, but also has suggested at campaign events that he would limit low-income housing developments in suburbs. The Republican Party 2024 platform blames high housing costs on illegal immigration and vows to deport them, which some housing experts have said would reduce the availability of construction workers and add to the cost. The platform also promised a mix of demands and supply side measures.
There's a lot to unpack there.
There's a lot there, man. I feel like these articles kind of go round and round to try and give their one-sided story.
I just want to say something real quick. I hate this notion that oh my God, no one's going to build houses if he deports illegal aliens.
Right.
First of all, let's just remember that any company that is employing illegal aliens without verifying immigration status is breaking the law.
That goddamn
Not
right.
the same thing.
Yes, right.
Sorry.
Yep.
So we're assuming that all of these companies are breaking the law to complete what we need to be done.
Yeah.
That's a far stretch.
I mean, we started this conversation with corruption. I don't think it matters anymore. You know what I mean? It's just like, nobody cares. You know what I mean? Like if there's a cheaper way to do it where I can make more money, am I going to go to jail? Okay, no, then let's do it. You know what I mean? Nobody cares anymore about what's right and wrong.
Absolutely.
And so
that one just it chaps my rear end because first of all, you're not going to. It's a far stretch to make this sound like, oh my God, he's going to kick out 10 million illegal immigrants over in the next 12 months. Mm-hmm. It ain't going to happen. So Harris's plan, she was touting this $25,000 down payment assistance deal The problem there is that does not help affordability. And some can argue it makes it worse by increasing demand without the supply side.
Right.
You don't need that also because you already there's 2,400 down payment assistance programs throughout the country.
That's right.
That are publicly funded, right? There's private ones too. And then, the tax breaks for the builders. Yeah, you need that, but no one had any specificity about, okay, builder, you're only going to get this tax break if you're building in this range.
That's right.
Because right now the home builder's looking at it from the local standpoint of saying, man, I don't make a profit until I sell at 400,000, so that's all I'm going to build.
That's right.
And this goes back to, and I'm sorry, here in San Antonio, I get passionate, give me the red ass about this, but even our mayor Ron Nirenberg was out there touting, oh, look, housing affordability is going to hurt because Trump won. And I'm thinking, okay, and I'm on the SABOR, a couple committees there, and there's a proposal from the city, from one of the city council people, for an additional sewer inspection for any house that's going to be built. And meanwhile, SAWS and CPS says, no, you don't need it. But this would be like an additional $1,500 cost to the developer.
Right.
Which per developed lot, probably.
Yeah, right.
Which disincentivizes them to continue to
adds
build.
like $10,000 to the sales price. So it's all
right.
Everybody
is trying to
say,
skew
malarkey.
it, spray it one way in order to benefit themselves and their department or their sector. That's tough. So one more thing. I mean, we're going to keep going back to this. So mortgage applications, and this is just looking at historic data. As you can see, looks like 2016, right before the election, was a very low point, and it wasn't the lowest point, but it was a pretty low point in regards to mortgage applications. And as you can see, November 2016, moment he got essentially elected, it wasn't official, but he was elected, boom, applications started rising. And that tells me that the sentiment or the confidence in the consumer. Now, mind you, we were in a different rate environment, not crazy different though.
No, I mean rates were they had
5.5 or so.
They had between 5 to 6.
Correct.
For a very long stretch of time.
Right.
So it's
very healthy market in my opinion when that happened. But that's something that I looked at going, well, I mean, we had a pretty healthy market until the pandemic took place.
Yeah. I mean, you had in that range, right? You had economic growth, $2 a gallon gas. The fundamentals were there. Job creation was going on. The unemployment rate was very low under President Trump,
right?
Under his first term. So yeah, everybody was feeling good, man. They were confident.
Right. Yeah.
And so people went out and they bought a bunch of houses, which was awesome for everybody.
Absolutely. So let's see here. Going back to this stuff here, how Trump's win could impact the housing market. And they go into detail on some of these things. Let's see here. A pre-election analysis by Realtor.com gave a mixed review of both candidates' plan. What the hell is that?
Cancer. It's different in a child.
Where's that coming from? Okay.
Because your child's
Stop it.
still growing.
I hate those.
There we go. Okay, back to me. Let's see. Okay, so a pre-election analysis by Realtor.com gave a mixed review on both candidates' plans, praising some of their proposals while warning of potential negative impacts from others. The online realty company hailed Trump's plan to boost housing supply by targeting regulations on housing developments, which has characterized as unnecessary and a killer. The report said cutting regulations could make it easier for builders to add homes at a lower price point, nothing that the cumulative cost of regulations at the federal, state, and local level add more than $90,000 in cost to a new home.
Yep.
Zoning rules, building codes, and labor standards are just some of the regulations that builders navigate during the process of developing a lot and building a home. Realtor.com's chief economist Daniel Hale told Fox Business. Builders and developers pay fees directly to the government, shoulders costs to study impact of construction and comply with the various rules, and also run into delay waiting for approvals. Hale explained while many of the rules undoubtedly well intentioned, they layer on costs that ultimately borne by the consumer.
Sure.
So basically, we're passing it on to our consumers. And in what reason were they intended good? Probably so. But since you raised the question of corruption, probably not.
I disagree. They were not intended to be good.
Please explain.
I'll tell you my just background on this. So when I worked for a home builder many years ago, 20 years ago or so, we used to go to all the Metro study meetings. And I can vividly remember sitting in a Metro study meeting where they talk about development, where they're developing, where they're not developing, things that are impacting development. And I can remember the gentleman that runs this meeting, we had it every 6 months or so, to all the developers in town. I can remember when he just went off and was, because the number that the local government corruption was basically taking from you, whatever you want to call it. They just added another $1,500, had just crossed $4,000 per developed lot. And and he was going crazy about it. That was 20 years ago. Now I've heard from people in the industry here locally that it's close to 40 here locally. Here they're talking about 90 on a nationwide. I'm sure there's some markets that are more corrupt and are stealing more money. You know what I mean? But that just goes to show you what's being accomplished with that we really have to have. Right. What made it change from $4,000 20 years ago to $40,000 now per developed lot?
Can't blame that on inflation.
Can't blame that on inflation. All at the expense of the consumer that's buying the house, and the developer has no choice. But if they want to keep doing business, they've got to pay the man, and they've got to increase their price accordingly.
We're going to need a Texas Doge.
Yeah. So when you talk about that would be an example of how that corruption affects our real estate and our market immediately. You know what I mean? If it doesn't have to be there, you're stealing money. You know what I mean?
Correct.
And is period. End of story. And Ron Nirenberg and the people that are talking about it, that they all, of course, they're all going to support this. You know what I mean? They're professionals at it. So but all that needs to go away or be brought under control in some way, in my opinion.
Definitely. Let's see here. So I've got go for it, John.
Oh no, well I was just going to add, right? So yes, it's going to be interesting to watch here because you've got a couple of components, and this does tie into rates, right? The market is assuming right now that Trump's going to raise all these tariffs, which is going to make things more inflationary.
I've got tariffs on the list, so we can talk about that now.
Perfect. That's a great segue.
Absolutely.
I was not even paid. There was no paid sponsorship for that. So with Trump bringing tariffs in, it will have an impact. It can have an impact on raising the cost of goods.
That we import and buy from abroad. So before you continue, let's explain what the tariff is, because there's a lot of folks listening that hear tariffs thrown around all over the place, especially in the last several months. And if you turn on the media, mainstream media, it's all bad. It's a bad thing. It's going to make everything go up for us Americans. But what a tariff is essentially is a cost on top of what it costs them to make it in China or wherever else in order for them to sell it in the United States. Turn the tables. They all have tariffs on us. We can't make a product and sell it in China without getting taxed, essentially.
If you want to go to the Alamo Dome during a big event and sell popcorn, somebody's going to charge you for that spot.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean? For you to make money. It's the same concept.
And you're banking on being able to sell enough to cover that cost and then make a profit.
Right. And if you own that building, you have the right to do that.
That's
you know what
right.
I mean? It's a very similar concept. Yeah.
Go for it, John.
Well, what I was going to go with that was according to the National Association of Home Builders, already framing lumber alone is up 17% year over year. So everyone talks about, oh, look, inflation's only at 3%. No, the framing lumber is up 17%.
Right.
That's going to translate into the higher cost to build a house.
Absolutely.
Shelter costs continue to go up and up. So the fear there is, right, so if Trump further raises tariffs and we're not producing enough framing lumber here in the U.S., then it's going to raise costs, which it could. And so
It absolutely could. Yeah. I mean, I've looked at those factors as well. And I think where we would benefit more so is our everyday products that we buy from China. If we can start manufacturing them here, or if we're already manufacturing them, it gives the folks here locally a leg up because they're now going to be making more money.
Right. So, and this is where, I do wonder, how much of this is, again, media putting stuff out to make it worse, because I don't think I've ever heard, Trump say anything about, I'm going to raise a tariff on lumber to increase the cost of housing. He's a real estate developer.
Correct.
He's every time if you really listen to him, he's talking about tariffs on products specifically from China.
That's right.
Or other anti-American countries.
Yep. I mean, how many vehicles do we buy from China every year with no tariff? I mean, they're just making pure profit once they get it over here.
Right. So it's, give him some time to get in there and really see. That's where I'm going on the tariffs thing. Let's see if it's truly going to have a real impact. Now, where what is being made overseas? Appliances, right? So maybe that can go up. But man, we used to make some pretty good appliances here in the U.S.
That's right. That's right. I mean, a lot of things and that idea behind we're going to pay more for our products. No, we'll just not buy those products anymore.
Yeah. It's funny.
We'll bring it back home.
It's funny you bring up appliances from a long time ago. A friend of mine and I were having this conversation a couple days ago. Nowadays everybody gets refrigerators and washers and dryers, and they last 5, 6, 8 years. All of my friends' parents' refrigerator from 1980
are still rolling,
still running, and it's in their house if they're still around, or it's in somebody's garage holding beer.
Yeah,
and they still work. You can't kill them. You know what I mean? We really went awry with that. As opposed to just making it here and making it last forever. But I guess there's a lot more money in a product that gets turned over.
It's very true. It's
every 6 or 8 years, as opposed to 30 or 40.
So my vote on the tariffs is it's really going to be a wait and see.
Right.
I don't think it's going to have a drastic impact tomorrow. On the price of a house. I mean, that's not what Trump's a real estate guy.
Well, let me paint a picture real quick, and you guys can comment on it. So in a perfect world, we don't live in anywhere close to a perfect world, but in a perfect world, we start implementing tariffs. Now, this is hypothetical. It's not what's actually happening, but I want to give you the other side of the coin that you haven't been hearing. Let's say we implement tariffs on the goods that are coming abroad, and year after year, they shift our habits shift from buying from China as much as we currently do, because we are heavily reliant upon their products, to America, to the point that the United States is still making pretty good money from the tariffs on the products that China and everywhere else decided to still continue to make that small marginal profit on, that we just could not live without, to the point that we start paying less in taxes. And the less in taxes could be in property taxes, could be in income taxes, could be in many ways, shapes, and forms, which then internally and inherently solves that affordability crisis, because we've got more money to spend. We've got more disposable income. There's room in our debt to income ratio. The businesses here locally are making more money because we are now buying from them predominantly. What are your thoughts on that? Because that, I think, is in the intention of what this is supposed to do if implemented correctly, if balanced right and all that jazz.
So go ahead.
You go ahead.
Okay. Well, I've got a hot sports take real quick.
Okay.
That's the spiral upward. Because if the stronger that we can make our economy here,
Right.
U.S. economy, the stronger our dollar gets.
That's right.
The stronger our dollar gets, there's more outside demand for, guess what? Our U.S. treasuries again.
That's right.
And if we have more demand for our U.S. treasuries, those yields are going to go down.
That's right.
Which means that more people are buying fixed income instruments. Mortgage rates will follow that.
That's
too.
exactly right.
And then we get increased affordability. And so the other thing too, right, is if we do have a stronger economy, right, we're bringing more goods home. There's more revenue going into the U.S. Treasury, coupled with, I'm going to throw the Doge out there, right? Coupled with cuts on spending, maybe we could stop some of that debt clock, or at least slow it down.
That's right. That's right.
With a lot of work, we can knock off 1%, right? Yeah.
But it's a start.
But a step in the right direction is a step in the right direction.
Right.
I agree. And I jotted down Treasury yields because when we talked about it a minute ago, I didn't add my take on what might be causing that, so I'll just throw that out there. My concern as to why the yield is rising.
It's because the dollar's going down
against trend when the rate is being dropped. My concern, I don't have anything to. My concern, I can't I can't say it's for certain, is that it's a lack of international buying pressure.
That's
what
right.
I mean? If other countries are buying our bonds at a slower pace, the yield is going to have to go up to make enough, liquidity
it has to become more
to make those
attractive.
transactions.
That's right.
That's how they make it more attractive. That's how they create, how they get bonds sold. So that's a little bit of a concern. That's why I'm watching that. That's why I look at it every day. I want to see how long it continues to go against the trend. And I hope in this case I'm wrong and you guys are right.
Right.
But it seems like something is causing that. And it's a big market. That's not
and
it's billions of dollars.
Would you agree that as we are seeing it increase against what the norm would be in many cases, that it is a depiction of the dollar losing value?
Well, the dollar's value against other major currencies, has held up very strong right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it could certainly be a picture of less demand to hold U.S. dollars. So other countries have to hold U.S. dollars historically to buy oil and gas through OPEC and any other, Saudi Arabia-based organization, like we talked about before.
National currency,
Yeah.
right.
And the way they hold dollars is they buy bonds, so they have access to big numbers of dollars when they need them to buy oil and gas. Well, there's a shift changing place where that's no longer required, and these countries are starting to buy oil and gas from each other and Saudi Arabia in their own currencies. You know what I mean? That's that whole BRICS concept we talked about. They're trying to do a cryptocurrency platform where every country can come in and use their currency to buy this coin, and then that coin will be accepted to buy oil and gas. Well, if our dollar's not needed to buy oil and gas anymore, we're going to see our bond market see a huge drop in demand at some point. And I'm hoping that's not what we're seeing there,
Correct.
As a slow, because if countries are starting to slow down on buying our 10-year bonds, that's going to create we're just accustomed to that being a necessity for the last 50 years, you know, and we operate as such, so.
Well, you've also got another component in there, right? Which is 3 years ago, the Treasury needed $300 billion in U.S. Treasury notes issued per quarter, basically to run the government. Now that number is 1.4 trillion per quarter.
Right. It's
so
whoa.
So if the government doesn't need to cut, to issue 1.4 trillion, right? Now you got a more limited supply,
right?
More demand, more value, higher price, again back into lower yields.
Mm-hmm.
So cutting out a lot of the fat, needs to be done.
Yeah, and I think that would definitely, we would see impact from that, which then correlates to, again, us having more money in our pockets, more room in our DTI, a greater confidence in spending and buying and investing in our land, et cetera. But yeah, there's plenty there. Okay, let's see here. We've got, JC, how long have we been going?
Just about to hit 54 minutes.
Okay, good deal. Let's see how we can bring this home real quick. All right, so we've got obviously home values. We've talked about inflation. We've talked about tariffs. We've talked about buyer sentiment. We have talked about some policies, some regulations that I believe that he's intending to deregulate a little bit to allow more movement in our industry. What I wanted to talk about is, what do you think values essentially could come of this? Because we are seeing confidence in our stock market right away. I mean, has anybody looked at their 401k? Has anybody looked at Bitcoin? And that those two markets they don't go hand in hand.
No.
So this is two separate sectors that are seeing confidence at the same time.
Same thing with gold and silver. They're sitting at all-time highs, and they usually operate to an inverse of the stock market.
That's right.
And that's a
It's
little
like
strange
all
as well.
the sectors are going okay, kind of like that little video that I showed.
Long term. I mean, that's long term, Grub.
Right.
Over the year, gold is up to an all-time high, which typically with the stock market being at an all-time high, those normally don't happen at the same time.
No.
Well, we're still drinking champagne, right? America won last night.
Yeah, touche.
There's some of that.
That is right. But yeah, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
So I've got some fun facts. You know me with my fun facts. Love the fact that the stock market is up. I think that's awesome. It helps with that consumer psyche.
Correct.
But again, break down the numbers, and you still have the wealthiest 1% of our country own 50% of all stocks. The top 10% of our country own 87% of all stocks. The bottom 50%, most of America, own 1% of the stock market. So they're being fed into this exuberance by the talking heads. And, it's like, man, why does the radio always say, oh, stock market did this today, when half the readers don't have any skin in that game? But
Right.
what is interesting, and I think this ties back to the value and importance of home ownership as wealth creation, because I broke this number down: stock ownership by race.
Okay.
So
Believe it or not, more black people own more stock than Mexicans. I saw that the other day. Matter of fact, I had Mauricio Sanchez on here last time, JC, and we pulled it up on the screen. We were both like, what?
Yeah. So, but you still have this massive shift there, difference. White stock ownership by race. White families, 89% own stock. Black families, 0.7%.
Yep.
So 0.7% own stock. Hispanic, 0.6. And even though black families make up 14% of the population, Hispanic make up 19% of the population. Other is 10%. I'm not sure what all other is there, but either way, you've got that massive disparity there, right? Which goes to, how do we get a wealthier country?
Education.
Well, if
Hopefully
black
they listen to this podcast.
Right. But if black and Hispanic populations, less than 1% have stock ownership, then where's their wealth coming from?
The white people.
No, there's that. But I was looking for housing. I was looking for real estate
about
there.
That. Yeah.
So that's where, again, I think the awesome that the stock market's doing good, right? But at the same time, man, there's value in home ownership.
Well, I think to your point, does the stock market truly dictate the wealth of Americans?
The paper.
No.
Correct. It does not. Yeah. I think the wealth of America for the layman should almost be measured based on home ownership.
Yeah.
Versus stock market.
It's a good point. But I also want to point out, we did us three. We did a few months ago the podcast on the national debt and how out of hand it is. And John's very good about finding these numbers, and I remember him sharing some of these then. And I just want to point out, when you think about it logically, so we've got a stock market that's at an all-time high beyond what anybody could imagine, that's only owned by the top 1%. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Of the majority is owned by the top 1% or 10% of our population. At the same time, our debt is at an $1.4 trillion per quarter and accumulating and at an all-time high. And you understand who owns it. You understand how much debt we have and how the market is booming. All seems to be at the expense of the ones of these populations down here that our media and everybody else wants to talk about how much we need to be helping others. You know what I mean? Nothing comes to mind but Ponzi scheme. You know what I mean? It really does feel like we are, screwing over a big portion of our. That's where this kind of come full circle with this corruption. That's where you end up. You know what I mean? You end up with a system where we just throw all the debt onto this screen. You know what I mean? And it just keeps going. And these people are getting filthy rich. And it's all at the expense of this consumer that wants to buy a house, but now the fees are $90,000, you know what I mean, just per developed lot.
Correct.
And their price is 3 times as much as it should.
That's right.
And it's really hard for some people, to see that, you know what I mean, to realize who's winning and who's losing here.
Well,
it's created in such a way that it's very difficult to see who's being screwed, you know what I mean, and who's really winning.
It's a very convoluted picture that is damn near impossible for the layman to navigate through.
Correct.
With so much data that is being spewed, and most of the data does not even affect you
by design.
Right.
And that's why, we look at news articles and stuff, and I can appreciate that. I consider everything that comes across as a media source at this point in my life as propaganda. I do not consume it.
Yeah.
I know that sounds extreme, but I do not consume it. I don't read it. If I want to know something, if I want to know anything, I go to the source I want to go to, and I look it up and I understand it. And I in almost every case, I try to find out what research studies were done to draw these conclusions. And I go study those research studies.
Right.
I'll give you a great, and if you start doing that, it will change the way you look at everything.
You'll at least be able to start spotting the BS.
I'll give you an example in my personal life. I started a carnivore diet with a few other people in January. It's probably been one of the most amazing things I've ever done. You feel great. There's this increased energy level, you know what I mean? And it's just very hard to explain how cool it is. And but I get asked all the time, aren't you worried about cholesterol? Aren't you worried about cholesterol? And I'm like, no, I never really thought about it. You know what I mean? Because I quit believing all this shit you believe years ago. So I'm not worried about it. But I got asked about it so much, that I thought, well, man, maybe I should check into it. And I checked into it. And I looked it up, and I went to the NIH website and read their recommended standards for cholesterol. Well, in 1983, the level where they recommended a statin was 340. Now it's 200. It's gone down that much over time. Statins are the drugs that cause the most side effects that require additional, prescriptions to be prescribed. How many billions of dollars do you make by lowering that number that much over time?
Wow.
Billions. So, of course, the next step I do is, okay, fair enough. Let me look at all the research studies you've done to
confirm
to draw this conclusion and make these changes. And so I don't want to give the answer because it's so silly and it comes right from the NIH website. I'm doing everything I can to get people to start looking at this stuff on their own. Every time I'm asked that question about cholesterol, here's how I answer it. I've gone to the NIH website, sets the standard of care for cholesterol, and I've read their changes of statin recommendation over the years, and I've reviewed all the research they've done to draw these conclusions. I would love for somebody intelligent like yourself to do the same thing, and if you can draw any conclusion other than this number has been reduced to sell more drugs at the expense of our population, I would love to sit down and have a constructive conversation with you. Wow. I tell every single person that because I've reviewed the data, and I'm not going to argue with somebody that has not. You know what I mean? Right. Because they're reading the headline, and the headline says cholesterol is going to kill you. You know what I mean? And they want to argue from that perspective. Go read the data from the source that sets the standard, and then let's sit down and have a conversation. No one has ever come back to do that, and they will not. I have read the data.
Well, people are starting to see through the BS. I mean, that's why you got. Why do you think the DC insiders are scared right now? The talking heads on television scratching their head, going, "Man, how could these minorities vote for Hitler?"
They realize that they're getting screwed, right?
Right.
Yeah,
That's
for
right.
sure.
I mean, you look at the drop in media viewers, and it is, almost by half.
Yeah.
In many cases, MSNBC down a half, CNN down 47%.
And they should be thrilled that Trump's president because it gives them material for the next
Something to talk about.
Right.
That's right.
Now, and that corruption runs so deep. That's one of the things that RFK keeps talking about, and I hope he gets put in charge of something substantial in our medical system because it needs an overhaul. But it's one of the notes I wrote down. 50% of the budget that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, uses to operate off of every year, over 50% comes from the agency, the pharmaceutical companies that they regulate.
Wow.
So the companies that they regulate pay over half of the budget to operate that entire. So when I'm saying all these organizations and all these government agencies need a complete overhaul, that's what I mean by complete overhaul.
Right.
You can't regulate somebody that is paying you off.
Yeah,
That is an
touche.
oxymoron.
You mean
know what
these
I mean?
companies that overcharge to make our insurance cost more that we have to pay?
Yeah, those
Basically,
guys. Yeah.
bottom line, yeah.
And it's gotten so out of hand. Another thing they push is trying to get rid of this advertising on TV. You know what I mean? They advertise these drugs on TV. We're one of the only countries with
That even allow
modern
it.
society
That's right.
that even allow that. And if you dig into it some more and watch some real interviews with some people that used to work at these companies, they don't classify it as advertising anymore. They said it was once upon a time it was advertising. We paid the media to advertise. Now we pay them such a large number for advertising, but we want to have influence on every
advocating.
article that comes out relating to medicine. We want to be able to approve it. We want to have a say so. So eventually they control all the messaging.
Well, they've
that's going out.
infiltrated
Yeah.
the departments that they essentially were trying to get to have their message go out, and now they've got it all.
They've got it all.
I guess the irony is, right, we had less health problems when Joe Camel and the Marlboro Man were on TV.
Everybody was healthier when the Marlboro Man was on too. It's so disgusting, and like for me, one of the most disgusting things are that the healthcare and industry media do together. These pharmaceutical companies, these benzodiazepines and what is antidepressant medications
SSRIs.
that once upon there are people that need that have real but now they are selling it. You know what I mean? You had a stressful day, we'll
Here
get
you
you
go.
on an antidepressant medication and everything will get better. And the TV shows, these reality TV shows that people watch, do nothing but create confusion and chaos and
false
and you're
expectations.
not pretty enough, you're not
That's
smart
right.
enough, you need to get some work done, your head's not right, and every commercial is the fix.
That's
you
right.
You can go to the doctor right now and get antidepressant medication, and
Life will be great.
Yeah, and then people wake up one day and wonder why they're making horrible decisions and things aren't working.
Because they just, like you said earlier, they now have the confidence to do the bad stuff that they were intended to do.
Yeah, it's really bad, and somebody's got to control that because these are our people, these are our young people, this is our future. You know what I mean? Like we should be working to make that as healthy and clean and on the up and up and non-corrupt as possible, and we don't have that now.
I agree.
It is disgusting. Last thing, and I'll get off the topic. I read some data that these pharmaceutical companies pay whatever doctors can prescribe the most antidepressant medications. They offer them speaking engagements.
Oh, wow.
At might be at a high school, so we can tell a bunch of young people how to get
Messed up they
unstressed.
are.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah. And they offer them speaking engagements for money, and they spend billions of dollars a year to do that. You want to talk about corruption? Billions of dollars. And so I got curious about it, and I've gotten kind of pretty passionate about this the last year or so. And I went and met with a guy that works for one of these companies and just said, man, I want to know, is this true? Does this really happen? You know what I mean? And the guy thought for a minute, and he said, one, he didn't want to be mentioned, you know what I mean, or anything. But he goes, yeah. He said, he goes, I'm the compliance officer. I go to these speaking no, get this. I go to these speaking engagements to make sure they follow the script. We provide them with the speech they give.
Wow.
And if they don't follow it, we don't pay them what we agreed to pay.
Wow.
That's what's going on behind the scenes. Also, we can sell more antidepressant medication to people that don't need it.
You know what that sounds like?
Corruption.
In addition to what we started this conversation with, hey, I'm going to pay you to be on this show for your endorsement.
Yeah,
Need
same
you to ask me
concept.
this question.
Need you to say this.
Don't ask
thing.
me that one.
It's not done.
Or you won't get your money.
It's not done because it doesn't work.
Right.
It's done, and there's so much money involved because it works. And there's a power in messaging, and the media knows this, in repetition.
Right.
Even if it's something you don't believe. If you're a person that goes, man, this isn't for me, I would never do that, I feel great. Well, if you watch television programming and commercials that tells you need it over and over and over again for years,
Oh, you start to think it.
I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how knowledgeable you are. There's a gentleman by the name of Joe Overton. It's called the Overton window. Your perception of that topic has changed.
That's right.
Because of how much of this data has been buried
Yep.
in you over the years. And then you wake up one day and go, oh, I'm going to give this a try.
Absolutely.
And it works. Wow. It works like a charm. And that's why it's done nonstop. And we're inundated with it on TV.
Absolutely.
I'm glad. Thank God for Elon Musk buying Twitter.
Absolutely. And guys, we've talked a lot about all kinds of things in regards to what kind of makes this tick. And some may go, well, that's not real estate related. Well, let me tell you, all of this stuff kind of circles back to real estate and how you can afford real estate, how you can live longer to be able to live and see these things out in real estate. Final thoughts, guys. John, you want to?
Well, yes. So, just to your point there.
Yep.
I mean, fun fact here: real estate touches over 70% of the economy.
Wow. So basically, everything we were just talking about,
it all filters back. Again, I'm going to die on this sword. Home ownership is the key to long-term wealth creation. Not get rich quick, long-term.
That's right.
So the sooner that we can get people into a house that they could comfortably afford, or responsibly afford, I should say that, the better. And, again, America won last week. Regardless of if it was your pony, America still won. So, and God bless America.
Amen to that. We need more property on the ground. We need more finished product for folks to buy. And I'm going to be even more specific. We need more affordable properties for folks to buy. Less regulations.
Less pork, less per developed lot expenses that just aren't necessary. You know what I mean?
That's right.
They'll never tell you that, but just like John pointed out, I love his data. You know what I mean? All these taxes and expenses and regulations that are put in on developers and people trying to buy their first house are impacting the group of people that need it the most.
Yep.
It's impacting them in the hardest way.
Absolutely.
The people that want to buy that first house, they want to try to start growing their wealth. You know what I mean? And they want to make that step, and they don't want to be a renter anymore, whether they're 25 years old or 30 years old or 40 years old. It doesn't matter. All that is just getting in the way of them taking that first step. They're the victims of that high expense. Other people, you can afford it. You know what I mean? And a lot of people can afford it, and it just sucks. You got to pay more money. Yeah. But it really hurts the people that, want to change their life and take that next step. And all for what? Is it because we spend it responsibly? Is that why?
Right.
Is it because we take that money in and spend it responsibly? I don't think any sane person could say that.
I agree. I agree. And sometimes that pork is hard to trim out. I mean, we have a new phrase, el puerco es terco. The pork is hard-headed.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's very true. Very true.
Well, gentlemen, this was a great discussion.
Love
we
it.
covered a ton of different bases here. We tried to stay away from politics as much as possible for the listeners out there so that you can formulate your own opinion. Now, I will leave the links in the description of this so that you guys can go and read these articles and dive in deeper. Further than the articles. Go to the actual sources of the articles that they're being pulled from and determine if these articles are only pulling out little snippets or giving you the full story, the full scope and gamut of what it is that the research shows versus what they're trying to prove to you in this article. I think as John and Andy said, we need more units on the ground, more affordable housing. And in order to do that, we've got to cut some of the fat out that is being charged and levied on these builders. Why? Because they have the money to do so, and they really have no say in the accountability from who's collecting from them. Hopefully, we'll see a little bit more accountability in the next 4 years. We definitely will see, I'm hoping, more confidence in the American people, in the American dream. Because let's face it, that's why we're all here today. Gentlemen, I want to thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mark.
Hopefully you guys got something out of this discussion. If you did, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with a friend. We'll be bringing another guest back next week, but until then, we will catch you later.
Adios.